summer, I began watching a YouTuber by the name of Molly Burke, who is blind and has overcome her disability. However, Molly was not born blind. She lost her vision at the age of 13 to an eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. However, she has been considered legally blind her entire life. Now imagine the following. Go into a store in a new town and not knowing where anything is and not being able to see anything. Not being able to drive yourself anywhere you go and having to have assistance everywhere that you go. Not knowing what you look like or what any of your loved ones look like. These are just a few of the many struggles that blind people face on a daily basis. Despite these limitations, there are many surprising things that blind people are able to do. Today, I'll give you a brief overview of blindness and the struggles that blind people face on a daily basis. First, I'm going to provide a few facts about blindness. First of all, many people believe that blind people have enhanced senses, but that is actually not true. Blind people have no better senses than you or I. Mark Maurer from the National Federation of the Blind says that blind people just have to concentrate more on their other senses than we do. There are also some advantages to blindness, believe it or not. Most healthy blind people recognize these advantages and become to be okay with being blind. In fact, most healthy blind people, if given the opportunity to be sighted, they would still choose to be blind because they're comfortable with that. And Molly says that gaining her vision would be just as hard as it was when she first lost it because she would have to redo all those adjustments. And Maurer says some of the advantages to being blind are being able to read in the dark via Braille and not having to rely on sight to do things. Blind people have learned how to navigate through places without having to see what's going on around them, so that's a huge advantage for blind people. Another cool thing about blind people is they don't judge a book by its cover. Their first impressions of people isn't based on what they look like. They base their first impressions by sitting down and actually have a conversation with them, so their impressions are way more genuine than a sighted person. So that's a huge advantage. And a lot of blind people can read Braille, so whenever they're standing up giving a speech, they can read it with their finger and make it look like they're looking at the audience the entire time. So that's pretty cool. And another important thing to understand about blindness is that it's a spectrum. Being blind doesn't mean that you just see darkness. Most blind people still have a little bit of remaining vision. So Molly, for example, still has light and shadow perception. So if a light is on, she can tell and she can see where a light is coming from. Or if someone is standing in front of an open lit window, she can see their shadow. And Alex Hackett from Perkins School of the Blind says that only 10 to 15% of blind people have no vision at all. With the majority of the world being sighted, blind people face many struggles. The world just isn't made for them. So now that we understand some of the basics, we're going to talk about some of the struggles. Molly Burke is a positive person and she tends to be very positive about her blindness. She makes a lot of videos about showing all the things that she is capable of doing and the advantages to it and how she's overcome it. However, she still wants to be raw and genuine, so she made a video about the disadvantages to being blind and some of the things that are the worst in her opinion, so I'm going to talk about some of those things. First of all, she said that being blind and not being able to see yourself is really hard because for her, she really loves fashion and she loves makeup. And she constantly has to rely on the opinions of other people. She can't form her own opinion on how she looks. So she never knows. And another thing is blindness comes with vulnerability, and blind people are easily taken advantage of. And in a lot of cases, blind people are treated differently and less than they are, and they're treated as they're less capable than they actually are. And that makes it harder for them to get jobs and education. And that leads on to the next point where she said that blind people have a lack of access to good education. So most textbooks aren't made in Braille, so they can't read them. If a teacher is writing on a board, they obviously can't see the board, so they're not getting that information. And another thing is that learning math is difficult for them because a lot of it is visual and written, so they can't see any of that. And then another thing is that blind people constantly have to rely on other people to do things. They can't go to the store alone, they can't travel alone, and they can't read a menu at a restaurant alone, and of course there's many other things they can't do alone. And if they're not with another person, they still have to constantly rely on either a cane or a guide dog to navigate their way through stuff. So they're never completely free. And Molly says that that's one of her least favorite things about being blind, is that she's never free to do things on her own. And then lastly, one of the biggest things that she says is a disadvantage is the fact that 90% of communication is nonverbal, and they literally miss out on all of that. But in conclusion, there are a lot of misconceptions about blindness. One of the biggest being is that blindness means that you have better other senses and you don't. Secondly, we learned that blindness is a spectrum. It doesn't mean that there's total darkness. And lastly, we don't realize all the struggles that blind people face daily. I hope you've gained some knowledge about blind people and the struggles that they face, and I hope that with this knowledge we can be better for the blind community and understand that their blindness doesn't define who they are, it's just a disability that they face.